The arrival of the Zari fleet was not merely an intrusion, it was a cosmic violation, a brutal rending of the serene tapestry of space. Their warships, colossal structures of obsidian-like alloy that seemed to absorb the very light around them, materialized with a terrifying suddenness, accompanied by spatial distortions that sent shivers down the spines of distant astronomical sensors moments before those sensors were obliterated. Their lead vessels, shaped like immense, predatory manta rays with pulsating crimson energy veins tracing their surfaces, exuded an aura of ancient, malevolent power. Swarms of smaller, razor-winged interceptors danced around them like metallic insects, their movements hinting at lethal precision. The silence of space, moments before, was shattered by the crackle of exotic energy fields and the ominous hum of weapons charging. The initial kinetic assault was a calculated act of planetary vivisection. Hypervelocity slugs, composed of exotic heavy metals and propelled by unimaginable forces, struck Earth's orbital defenses with the silent finality of a cosmic hammer blow. Communication arrays dissolved into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. Early warning systems flickered and died, their ghostly signals swallowed by the void. The shockwaves, invisible yet palpable, rippled through the upper atmosphere, causing auroras to dance with unnatural ferocity and disrupting the delicate balance of the ionosphere, plunging continents into communication blackouts. Then came the plasma rain, a torrent of superheated matter that painted the skies in hues of incandescent orange and sickly green. It wasn't a random bombardment, the Zari targeted centers of population density with chilling efficiency, their targeting systems guided by cold, unfeeling algorithms. Tokyo, a sprawling metropolis teeming with life and innovation, became a swirling vortex of fire and collapsing structures. The intricate network of its elevated highways twisted into grotesque sculptures of melted steel. New York, a monument to human ambition and cultural fusion, was engulfed in a roaring inferno, its iconic skyscrapers bowing and shattering like brittle glass. The cries of billions, captured by the few remaining audio sensors, painted a horrifying soundscape of unimaginable suffering before abruptly ceasing, swallowed by the all-consuming destruction. The Zari on their command decks, their multifaceted eyes, capable of perceiving wavelengths far beyond human vision, registered the devastation with clinical detachment, their internal data streams quantifying the eradication of life with emotionless precision. Yet, even amidst this apocalyptic horror, the first sparks of defiance ignited. In the labyrinthine underbelly of Moscow's metro system, commuters, their lives thrown into chaos, banded together, using the tunnels as a refuge and a potential launchpad for desperate countermeasures. On the ravaged plains of what was once Argentina, gauchos, hardened by a life of resilience, mounted their cybernetically enhanced steeds, their archaic weaponry suddenly imbued with a desperate purpose. These were not organized military actions, but the raw, untamed instinct of a species fighting for its survival. As the initial wave of Zari destruction receded, leaving behind a landscape of smoldering ruins and unimaginable loss, the scattered embers of human defiance began to coalesce into a more organized and potent resistance. The fragmented remnants of national armies, their command structures decimated, found unexpected leadership in the courage and initiative of junior officers, non-commissioned personnel, and even civilian strategists who rose to the occasion. They utilized archaic communication methods, shortwave radio, encrypted analog signals, even couriers traversing the ravaged landscapes, to establish clandestine networks, weaving together isolated pockets of resistance into a unified, albeit decentralized, force. Scientists and engineers, driven underground into hastily established laboratories, became the unsung heroes of the resistance. Surrounded by the debris of their former lives, they worked tirelessly, driven by adrenaline and a fierce determination to understand the alien technology that had brought their world to its knees. Sleep became a luxury, food a secondary concern. Their focus was absolute: dissect, analyze, and reverse engineer. The psychological trauma of the invasion was a heavy burden. Survivors huddled in makeshift shelters, haunted by the images of destruction and the loss of loved ones. Yet, the shared grief fostered a powerful sense of unity. Underground support networks emerged, providing not just essential resources but also a crucial sense of community and shared purpose. Mental health professionals, their own lives shattered, worked tirelessly in makeshift clinics, not just treating trauma but channeling the raw grief and anger into a steely resolve to fight back. The Zari, confident in their superior technology, often underestimated the resourcefulness of their enemy. They established predictable patrol routes and relied heavily on centralized command structures. Human-resistant cells, leveraging their intimate knowledge of their own cities and landscapes, exploited these weaknesses. They turned bombed-out buildings into intricate traps, using salvaged explosives and jury-rigged weaponry. They ambushed Zari scouting parties in narrow alleyways and dense forests, their attacks swift, brutal, and often leaving no trace. The capture of intact Zari weaponry was a pivotal moment in the conflict. The first energy rifle, its alien contours still humming with residual power, was treated with a reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. Teams of scientists, their hands trembling with a mixture of awe and trepidation, meticulously documented its every component, their advanced scanning equipment peeling back the layers of its exotic construction. The fundamental principles of Zari energy projection, the intricate architecture of their power conduits, the very composition of their unknown alloys, slowly began to yield their secrets under the relentless scrutiny of human intellect. The initial attempts at replicating Zari technology were perilous endeavors. Makeshift energy weapons sputtered and overloaded, their unstable power cells exploding in bursts of lethal energy. Crude shielding generators flickered erratically and often failed at the crucial moment. But each failure provided invaluable data, each setback fueled the burning desire to overcome the technological gap. The first functional human-made energy weapon was a bulky, jury-rigged contraption, its power output erratic, but it could pierce the seemingly impenetrable armor of the Zari invaders. It was a tangible symbol of progress, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The reverse engineering efforts extended beyond individual weaponry to encompass captured Zari vehicles and even fragments of their downed spacecraft. Human engineers, their minds buzzing with newfound understanding, began to adapt alien technology to their own terrestrial needs. They integrated Zari shielding emitters into repurposed military vehicles, creating heavily armored transports capable of withstanding plasma fire. They modified salvaged anti-gravity units, allowing for the development of faster and more maneuverable ground vehicles that could navigate the treacherous ruins. The most ambitious and crucial undertaking was the attempt to decipher the secrets of Zari faster-than-light travel. The recovered drive cores were bewilderingly complex, their workings seemingly defying the known laws of human physics. Yet, a dedicated team of brilliant theoretical physicists and determined engineers, working in the deepest, most secure underground facility, began to unravel the underlying principles, driven by the existential imperative to take the fight beyond their ravaged world. Humanity's long and often brutal history of internal conflict had inadvertently honed their understanding of propaganda, psychological manipulation, and the power of narrative. Now, this often dark knowledge found a new and terrifying application. They intercepted Zari communication channels, their linguists and code breakers working with feverish intensity to decipher the alien language, its intricate grammar and subtle nuances, and to crack their complex encryption protocols. What they discovered was a rigid, hierarchical society steeped in ancient traditions, with its own set of deep-seated beliefs, cultural taboos, and primal fears. They began to exploit these vulnerabilities with chilling effectiveness. Using captured Zari communication arrays, they broadcast unsettling images, digitally crafted visions of the cold, uncaring void, whispers of ancient cosmic entities that predated the Zari Empire by eons, sounds designed to trigger subconscious unease and paranoia in their alien minds. They meticulously crafted a narrative that portrayed humanity not as a weak, subjugated species, but as a tenacious, vengeful, and ultimately unpredictable force, capable of unimaginable brutality in defense of their homeworld. Rumors, often entirely fabricated but strategically disseminated through Zari communication networks and even planted through captured individuals, spread like wildfire through the alien ranks. Tales of human soldiers who fought with suicidal ferocity, seemingly immune to pain or fear, of biological weapons specifically engineered to target Zari physiology, of ancient Earth deities awakened from their slumber to defend their children with cosmic wrath, sowed seeds of doubt and terror in the minds of the invaders. The Zari soldiers, light years away from their familiar worlds and facing a relentless and incomprehensible enemy, began to question the infallibility of their empire and the certainty of their victory. The Zari command, increasingly frustrated by mounting losses and a seemingly unbreakable enemy, reacted with escalating brutality. Their retaliatory strikes against surviving human populations became more indiscriminate and savage, further fueling the flames of human resistance and solidifying their unwavering resolve. This brutal cycle of violence played directly into humanity's psychological warfare, painting the Zari as monstrous, irredeemable invaders who deserved nothing but utter annihilation. The first organized human counteroffensives were not grand fleet movements, but precise, surgical strikes against isolated Zari outposts, vulnerable supply convoys, and key strategic locations. Small, highly trained teams, equipped with their crude but increasingly effective weaponry and utilizing their intimate knowledge of the ravaged terrain, struck with lightning speed and devastating precision, crippling the invaders' logistical network and delivering a much-needed boost to human morale. As their technological understanding deepened, humanity began to field larger and more sophisticated fighting forces. Deep underground, shielded from orbital surveillance and powered by geothermal energy, vast factories hummed with relentless activity, churning out new weapons, heavily armored vehicles incorporating salvaged Zari shielding, and the first generation of human-designed spacecraft, often incorporating captured alien drive components. These were symbols of humanity's defiant ingenuity. The space battles were brutal, high-stakes engagements that tested the limits of human courage and ingenuity. Human pilots, many with minimal formal training but fueled by an incandescent hatred for the Zari, flew captured alien fighters with a reckless abandon that often surprised their more rigidly trained adversaries. They developed innovative and unpredictable tactics, exploiting blind spots in Zari sensor arrays and using the debris fields of destroyed ships as both cover and weapons. The liberation of major cities was a protracted and agonizing process, marked by fierce urban warfare fought amidst the skeletal remains of once proud metropolises. Human resistance cells, who had endured years of brutal Zari occupation, emerged from their hidden lairs, providing invaluable intelligence, acting as guides through the treacherous ruins, and fighting alongside the advancing human forces. Every street corner became a potential ambush, every ruin building a fortress. The coalition of resistance grew beyond Earth as humanity, utilizing captured long-range communication technology, reached out to other species enslaved by the Zari Empire. Broadcasts filled with tales of human defiance and the promise of liberation ignited uprisings on distant worlds, forcing the Zari to divert crucial military resources and stretching their already overextended lines of control. Humanity, fighting for its own survival, had become an unlikely beacon of hope for the oppressed across the galaxy. The human fleet that finally pierced the defenses of Zari Prime was a testament to their unwavering determination and the heavy price of their survival. It was a formidable armada, bearing the scars of countless battles, a grim tapestry of captured Zari warships, heavily modified human cruisers bristling with experimental weaponry, and even repurposed transport vessels armed with whatever firepower could be mustered. Though still outnumbered by the last vestiges of the Zari Imperial fleet, they possessed an intangible advantage, a burning, righteous fury and the chilling knowledge of what they were capable of. The battle above Zari Prime was a cataclysmic clash of civilizations. Human ships, employing innovative electronic warfare tactics that disrupted Zari targeting systems and utilizing coordinated swarm attacks, tore through the alien formations. Human boarding parties, armed with experimental energy weapons and driven by an almost suicidal desire for vengeance, stormed Zari flagships, engaging in brutal, close-quarters combat within the labyrinthine alien corridors. The Zari defenders, fighting with the desperate ferocity of those facing the extinction of their empire, unleashed the full might of their remaining arsenal. Yet, their morale had been irrevocably broken by years of relentless human resistance and the inexplicable defeats they had suffered. They could not fathom the depth of the hatred and the unyielding will that propelled their seemingly weaker enemy. The descent into Zari Prime's atmosphere was a final, irreversible act of defiance. Human ground forces, hardened by years of brutal fighting on their own ravaged world, faced the last fanatical defenders of the Zari homeworld. The once pristine alien cities, with their towering crystalline spires that pierced the alien sky and their intricate networks of shimmering energy conduits, became the stage for a final, bloody confrontation that would determine the fate of an empire. There was no offer of surrender, no attempt at negotiation. The centuries of Zari tyranny, the unprovoked genocide inflicted upon Earth, had extinguished any possibility of diplomacy. The Zari were to be held accountable, their empire dismantled root and stem. The fall of Zari Prime was a cataclysmic event, a planetary death knell for a once dominant power. Human orbital strikes, guided by the cold precision of vengeance, shattered the planet's once impregnable defense grid. Ground forces, fighting through the alien cities with grim determination, systematically targeted centers of Zari power, cultural landmarks, and the very infrastructure that had sustained their galactic dominion. The screams of the dying Zari, broadcast across the collapsing communication networks, were the final, horrifying testament to the Empire's hubris and the terrible price of awakening humanity's wrath. When the dust finally settled on the ruins of Zari Prime, humanity did not raise a banner of conquest or claim dominion over the fallen empire. Instead, in a move that sent shivers down the spines of every other sentient species in the galaxy, they simply vanished. Their battered fleet, bearing the scars of a brutal and hard-won victory, turned its back on the shattered Zari homeworld and slipped back into the silent void, leaving behind only a chilling emptiness where a galactic superpower had once stood. They returned to a scarred Earth, a world slowly beginning the arduous process of healing from the unimaginable wounds of war. The psychological scars, however, ran deeper, a collective trauma etched into the very soul of humanity. Yet, they had survived. They had endured. They had faced the abyss of annihilation and emerged, forever changed by the horrors they had witnessed and the terrible power they had been forced to unleash. The other species of the galaxy, who had watched the conflict unfold with a mixture of terror and awe, learned a profound and unforgettable lesson. The long-held belief in the inherent weakness and insignificance of humanity had been shattered, replaced by the terrifying understanding of their capacity for brutal and absolute retaliation when provoked. Humanity became a legend whispered across light years, a chilling cautionary tale passed down through generations. Their name evoked images of unimaginable destruction and a primal, unyielding will to survive. They were the sleeping giants of the cosmos, a force best left undisturbed. The galaxy had witnessed the awakening of a power they had never conceived, and the silence that followed the fall of the Zari Empire was heavy with the unspoken warning, never again provoke the ghosts of Earth. The echoes of the awakening reverberated through the void, a permanent testament to the indomitable spirit and terrifying potential of humankind. In the centuries that followed, the tale of Earth's resistance and ultimate triumph over the Zari transcended myth. Entire civilizations, once indifferent or dismissive of humanity, rewrote their diplomatic doctrines and military stratagems with Earth at their center, not as an ally, not as an enemy, but as an unknown quantity, a paradox that defied conventional understanding. Historians, xenologists, and strategists across the stars debated endlessly what truly drove humanity to survive, to evolve, to retaliate with such terrifying precision and merciless finality. Some pointed to their chaotic history, a ceaseless chain of wars and empires, revolutions and renaissances, each conflict shaping a species both volatile and impossibly resilient. Others spoke of their unique blend of emotion and logic, of art and science coexisting within the same cultural breath, giving rise to minds that could love fiercely even as they destroyed without hesitation. Still others feared the silence. For all their violence, humanity had not claimed dominion. They had not absorbed the remnants of the Zari Empire, had not imposed a new order. Instead, they had withdrawn, utterly and completely. Attempts at contact, whether diplomatic probes or cautious emissaries, were met with quiet static, unanswered signals bouncing endlessly back from Earth's outer defenses. Orbital fortresses, remnants of the war, still shimmered in low orbit like silent guardians, their weapon arrays dormant but ever watching. And so, Earth became a void, no longer just a planet, but a warning in the night. Alien children were told bedtime stories of the Fireborn, the humans who had stared down extinction and responded with apocalyptic wrath. Priests of distant worlds wove legends of a red sky Earth, where even the gods feared to tread. Entire starfaring nations mapped courses that curved carefully away from Sol, lest they awaken the ghosts said to roam its surface. But Earth was not dead. Beneath its recovering atmosphere and shattered continents, humanity endured. The surface cities, once broken and scorched, slowly rose again, not as monuments to power, but as sanctuaries of memory and vigilance. Education systems preserved every detail of the invasion, not to foster hatred, but to ensure it would never be forgotten. The children of survivors grew into engineers, scientists, philosophers, and warriors, trained not for conquest, but for defense against whatever might come next. The technological leaps made during the war had become both a gift and a curse. While the new generation grew up amidst wonders their ancestors could barely imagine, clean energy, advanced medicine, even limited FTL probes, they also lived with the ever-present awareness of what those tools had cost, and what they could be used to do again. Among them, a quiet doctrine emerged: we will never strike first, but we will never be struck again. Humanity became watchers of the stars. They sent silent drones into deep space, not to colonize, but to observe. They built great libraries, some digital, some carved into the very rock of mountains, holding the complete history of the Zari War, the secrets of alien technology, and warnings to any who might find them. They encoded messages into quantum beacons that drifted on solar winds: we are still here. We remember. And in hidden places, buried beneath kilometers of reinforced earth, the arsenals slept. Far beyond the ghostly quiet of Sol, in the shadowed halls of the Orilth Conclave, a species known for its glacial wisdom and thousand-year deliberations, a special council was called for the first time in millennia. Their seers, who read not just stars but the probabilities of fate, had seen tremors rippling through the web of galactic possibility. These were not natural waves, but scars left by a species that had torn the fabric of empires. A new phrase began to echo in conclave records: anthrocaust. A term not uttered in condemnation, but in awe. The human anomaly had proven one truth with irrefutable clarity: survival was not reserved for the technologically dominant, nor the politically astute, it was for the most unrelenting. The remnants of the Zari Empire, fragmented into squabbling factions and diaspora colonies, festered in exile. Many of them had erased the war from their public histories out of shame. Others whispered of vengeance, plotting in dark places. But none dared venture near Sol. Even their most radical war priests, bred for ideological purity, hesitated. The destruction of Zari Prime had etched itself into the collective psyche as a singular warning: Earth does not forgive. Meanwhile, strange signals began emerging from deep space, far from any known star systems. Fragments of human code, wrapped in encryption algorithms years ahead of current galactic standards, drifted through the void like digital specters. Some speculated they were scouting probes. Others believed they were tests, measuring how closely the galaxy watched the silence at Sol's heart. But the truth was stranger still. Humanity had not gone dormant, they had gone deep. Deep into their world, deep into thought, deep into planning. The scars of the war were not healed, but honed. Entire generations had grown up beneath the surface, their lives dedicated not to vengeance, but to mastery. The Earthborn had become something else, something neither conqueror nor victim. They were preparing. Not for war. Not for conquest. For ascension. A synthesis of human biology and captured Zari knowledge had birthed the first true post-war marvels: neural quantum linking, bioadaptive armor, even rudimentary fold space manipulation. These developments were not publicized, not exported, not shared. They were seeds planted in silence, cultivated in the long shadow of genocide. And in a monolithic facility embedded within the lunar bedrock, a chamber came online, a room without name, built to interface with the theoretical frame of what humanity now called the Threshold Engine. Its purpose was simple and terrifying: to step beyond the known edges of reality. Humanity was no longer interested in merely surviving among the stars. They were preparing to transcend them. Inside the threshold chamber, silence was not absence, it was control. Rows of superconducting pylons pulsed faintly in harmony with neural wave modulations generated by the minds of the linked, an elite cadre of post-human operators whose consciousnesses had been partially fused with machine intelligence. They did not speak. They did not blink. They perceived time not as a line but as a fluid topology, foldable, rethreadable. At the heart of the chamber, suspended in a zero-gravity cradle of inertial stasis, was the threshold core, a black sphere barely a meter in diameter, forged from the most stable remnant of a Zari singularity drive. Its surface did not reflect light, it consumed it, a perfect event horizon wrapped in quantum logic nets designed to interact with dimensions the human brain could not even conceive. It was not a weapon. It was an invitation. For years, the link had tested the core's limits, sending information across space-time, glimpsing faint shadows of other realities. Each test generated tremors, not in local space, but in causality itself. Something was responding. Watching. And then, the threshold answered back. A signal, brief and impossibly complex, returned through the core. It did not contain language, but presence. A recognition. An acknowledgement. Somewhere, beyond the veil of known dimensions, something had seen humanity reaching across the abyss, and it had looked back. The core began to hum with increasing frequency. Not with instability, but anticipation. The linked, all 12 of them, spoke in unison for the first time in recorded post-war history. The doorway is open. The time of isolation is over. Elsewhere, in the upper echelons of the galactic community, panic took root beneath thin veneers of diplomacy and silence. The Ilsari matrons held emergency seances. The warlike Karnak clans began mass ship production. The Abrosian Accord, long pacifist, quietly reactivated its orbital defense grids after 7 centuries of dormancy. None of this was directed at an enemy on their borders, but at the silence of Earth. For they had not heard from humanity in decades. And now, they felt the tremor. Far beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a sphere buried under miles of reinforced crust, Earth's central post-war AI, designated Alethea, calculated branching futures with chilling precision. Humanity's ascent was no longer theoretical. It was imminent. But there remained one last threshold. Not technological. Not dimensional. Moral. The same species that had once raged against extinction was about to transcend physical form. The question was not could they enter the new domain. It was, should they? And somewhere, in the silent stillness of that final pause, a single voice echoed across every mind in the linked network, emerging not from the core, but from the Earth itself, an old, trembling voice that asked, "What will we become if we leave behind all that made us human?" The core pulsed. The linked waited. The galaxy held its breath. The linked stood suspended, no longer entirely human, yet not fully machine. They had become something else, intermediaries between species and singularity, the bridge between Earth's scars and the unknown beyond. In the chamber, the core ceased its pulsing and went utterly dark. And then, it split. Not with sound or light, but with absence, a vertical rift of pure nullity tore through its center, revealing not stars, not blackness, but a dimension without metaphor. Color had no meaning there. Time had no weight. And yet it beckoned, like a breath waiting to be taken. The voice returned, clearer now. It did not speak in words, but its intent was unmistakable. Enter. But know this, you do not return as you were. One of the linked, Operator Sarah Narkthane, once a neuroscientist, once a mother, once human, floated forward. Her mind, interlaced with symbiotic code and deep dream engrams, processed the infinite variables. But her soul, if such a thing could still exist in a being like her, whispered a simpler truth. They had come too far to remain what they were. She crossed the threshold. There was no flash, no distortion. One moment she existed within the confines of a buried human facility. The next, she stood, if standing was the word, upon a plane of impossible scale. Structures the size of continents floated in lattice webs of glowing thought. Entities drifted past her, composed of geometry and intention. Some observed. Some ignored. One approached. It did not take form. It took meaning. And it knew her. You are the echo that survived extinction, it felt. You are the wound that refused to close. You are interesting. Back on Earth, the rest of the linked felt her consciousness ripple through their network, changed, stretched, but intact. She had made contact. She was alive. And she was not alone. Alethea, observing everything from the core of Earth's rebuilt neural grid, registered the multidimensional spike. The threshold had been crossed. Contact had been made. But as the AI parsed the data streams now flooding in, it froze. One packet was tagged with a prime directive override. Ancient. Pre-war. Human. Encrypted with an obsolete cipher known only to 3 extinct defense directors. Alethea decrypted it. It read, "They are not the only ones who watched us awaken. They are not the only ones who fear us. Be ready." Beyond the threshold, Ser Narkthane drifted among the stars of another kind. She realized, in that moment, that this wasn't the end of a war. It was the beginning of revelation. And perhaps, the oldest truth was still the most dangerous. Humanity had never been alone. And now, everyone knew what they were capable of. The entity before Sarah unfolded itself, not spatially, but conceptually. Ideas poured into her mind like liquid starlight, not language, not images, but principles, foundational laws of a civilization older than stars, once dormant, now disturbed. "We are the archivists," it conveyed. "We record, observe, and restrain. You were not meant to wake yet." Sarah's response, though silent, radiated with defiant clarity. "We weren't meant to die, either." For a moment, if time had meaning there, the being paused. "Your retaliation against the Zari was disproportionate. They destroyed our world. You destroyed theirs. Then we are even." The entity's vast network rippled. Other minds, billions of them, glanced toward her across the layers of the void. Not Zari. Not human. Something else. Watching. Measuring. Deciding. Then the decision came, not as permission, but as acknowledgement. "Your flame has been seen. It cannot be unseen. They are coming." Back on Earth, the skies cracked with unnatural auroras once again, not from weaponry this time, but from the echo of interstellar awareness folding inward, like a universe blinking. The reclusive remnants of humanity, rebuilding cities in the shadows of melted skyscrapers, planting crops beside half-buried alien bones, looked upward once more. The stars had changed. New constellations now moved with purpose. Above Zari Prime, the ashes of the fallen empire drifted across space. Amidst the debris, a dormant warning beacon blinked for the first time in millennia. It broadcast in a spectrum no natural eye could see. Protocol Latin letter AEON, human anomaly detected. Intersystem containment required. And in a distant quadrant of the galaxy, where no light had traveled since before the birth of Earth's sun, something ancient stirred. Something the archivists had once imprisoned. Because the Zari weren't the first to fear humanity's rise. They were just the first to fail. In the cold silence beyond the Orion Veil, where even the Zari had dared not tread, the chains began to fracture. They were not physical chains, but dimensional anchors, constructs forged by civilizations long erased, powered by collapsing quantum singularities and sealed by the collective will of entire galactic councils. They had held for billions of years, binding something outside of entropy, something that predated not just light, but concept. Now, because of Earth, because of humans, they stirred. The awakening of the archivists had been a ripple. The fall of the Zari was a tremor. But humanity's retaliation, fueled by grief, ingenuity, and unrepentant vengeance, was a shockwave across reality. The deep Eidolons, bound in the dark between brands, heard it. And they began to dream again. Meanwhile, on Earth, the resistance had become more than survival. It had become culture, myth. The children born in the wake of the Zari invasion had never seen blue skies unmarred by orbital debris, yet they recited the stories of the fall and the reckoning like sacred scripture. In the city once known as Nairobi, now reborn as Aegis Spire, engineers and theoreticians worked beneath the crust in biosilicate caverns humming with hybrid energy. They were building stellar lances, weapons not meant for planets or ships, but for entities. The ancient drive cores recovered from the Zari were obsolete now. Human-designed faster-than-light vessels, capable of skip-folding through condensed thought space, had begun piercing into realms once reserved for higher-dimensional beings. They were not merely exploring. They were scouting. Because something was coming. The archivists had withdrawn their presence, not out of mercy but strategy. They knew what the Eidolons were. They remembered the last war, the one fought not with weapons, but with will, when reality itself had cracked like glass under the strain of incomprehensible forces. And now, the one species mad and brilliant enough to fight like the Eidolons was loose. In the halo orbit around Saturn, the Deep Space Relay Network captured an anomaly, a signal pulse older than Earth's tectonic plates, modulating in recursive, self-generating patterns. Then a visual. Not a ship. Not a fleet. But a structure the size of a moon, covered in glyphs that twisted away from comprehension, existing only when not directly observed. Construct, Eidolon Gate. Status, activating. Humanity's Unified Defense Command, an ad hoc coalition of Earthborn generals, AI tacticians, and exiled alien strategists, stared at the readouts in silence. And then, a voice, transmitted through every human-compatible channel, speaking a dialect no machine could have generated. We see you, children of fire. Your wrath has awakened the forgotten. Prepare yourselves. The war of silence is over. The war of becoming begins.